All right, good morning, everybody. It is February 11th, and this is the HHS committee. Unfortunately, we are here to discuss the savings plan for both the Office of Human Rights and the Department of Health and Human Services. As we all know, we continue to be in very difficult circumstances, and there are a lot of unknowns, a lot of uncertainties, and so I appreciate the county executive's efforts to understand and demonstrate fiscal responsibility by proposing reductions, which I know none of us would like to make and none of us would like to accept. And I also want to express my appreciation. I know that there has been a significant attempt at trying to hold the line, particularly within departments like Health and Human Services, which are obviously very much on the front lines right now. But having said that, obviously there are still items that we have to look at, and we know this is a moving target, but we appreciate everyone's efforts and all the hard work that the men and women of both our Office of Human Rights and the Department of Health and Human Services are doing to support our community through this unprecedented time. So with that, why don't we kick it off to staff to just give an overview of the packet, and then we will ask Dr. Krell to say a few, well, first, actually, from the Office of Human Rights, we'll ask Mr. Stowe to say a few words, but why don't we start with the packet before us. And I also want to welcome Councilmember Nancy Navarro, who is joining us this morning as well. Thank you, Nancy, for your continued leadership, and we appreciate your participation this morning.
Thank you, Council Vice President Albornoz. In the packet you have before you today, it does start with a reduction for the Office of Human Rights of about $48,000, and I will turn it over to Mr. Mia to take you through that item along with Mr. Stowe, and then moves on to about $2.6 million in reductions that are put forth for the Department of Health and Human Services. As you already noted, as a percentage of budget, Health and Human Services has not been asked to put forth as much savings as some other departments in county government, but nonetheless, there are some areas where council staff is recommending that the committee not accept the savings, and so we can go through those as well. But I think I would turn it over to Mr. Mia and Mr. Stowe to take you through the Office of Human Rights item first.
Good morning, council members. The item before you is recognizing lapse savings from a newly created position, an investigator 2 position that was created for FY21. The lapse savings are from October through January of this FY21. And the position is currently under recruitment, expect to be filled later this month or in March. I will turn it over to Director Stowe to provide any additional detail.
Thank you, and good morning to our council chair and those who are gathered. Appreciate the opportunity to come and share this morning. We continue to work through a lot of the issues, many of which are being created by many of the things happening on the national level, as you all well know. We continue to also be vigilant on things that are occurring here in the community. And so in looking at these proposed savings, we are able to realize some of the same things we chatted last time we were together on this particular issue, in that programming that would normally have been held in venues and other places that would require equipment and materials to support those various programs and activities have now gone through a virtual world, as you all are well aware. And so as a result of that, we're able to realize some additional savings in operations that otherwise would not be available to us. Very excited about the fact that we are moving aggressively on the position that you so graciously enabled us to put into our budget going forward. We're very, very thankful for that. And so we're excited about getting him or her on board and moving that forward. So other than that, this morning, Mr. Chairman, that is basically where we are. We're hoping that there won't be any more savings that may have to come out of our particular budget, but as it is, we think we can certainly absorb what is being proposed. And so I would certainly avail myself of any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Stowe. So I know we're in the recruitment phase, but how's that going?
Well, at this point in time, at the very beginning of it, but we know now what we need, and very, very appreciative of OMB's help as well as our Office of Human Resources in trying to make very sure we've crafted the kind of description that will bring us the kind of candidates that we need really to fill the job that we have. So we're at that point now. We've gone through the process of massaging that a little bit. We had a replacement position that we had to fill before this one. That took a little bit more time than we had anticipated, but it was critical for our office. It was one of our key positions of a person who retired. And so that took up the lion's share of some of our time in getting us moving. But now we're in earnest working toward this one. But to your very specific point, we're hoping, matter of fact, we're going to be pushing to get this done this month, if at all possible.
Well, that's great news. And I think this particular reduction is fairly straightforward, and as has been noted by all of my colleagues, we keep adding a lot more work to your plate, Mr. Stowe, and so I think all of us recognize that it's going to be important moving forward beyond FY21 that we recognize the critical nature of the function of your office and put you and the entire county in the best position to succeed moving forward. And so I reluctantly support this particular reduction because, again, I think it's fairly straightforward. But do any of my colleagues have a comment that they'd like to make? Then, without objection, we will. Oh, sorry. Did somebody have something they want to say?
Real quick, I was going to say I just associate myself with everything that you've said as all of us continue putting forth legislation supporting our community in all aspects, and based on the organizational chart that goes to the Office of Human Rights. And so one step backward today, but we have to commit to ourselves to more steps forward with terms of supporting your office.
Thank you. Councilmember Rice.
Mr. Chair, just very quickly, and Director Stowe, you know this. I don't need to reiterate. We've done this over the 10 years that I've been here, but certainly we don't have to wait till next budget if we see that there are some things that are coming up. I fear that when we have this economic recovery, that we'll need to be very vigilant in ensuring that there isn't discrimination that continues to exist, that folks have a fair opportunity to employment, as well as that are ensured that there's not discrimination in the workplace. So from that perspective, we may have to revisit this sooner rather than later. Obviously now is not the time, but as businesses start to reopen and things get back to some sort of normalcy, I think that we'll have to watch this very carefully. So,
thank you.
Agree. So then, without objection, colleagues, we accept the recommendation of the proposed reduction. Ms. McMillan, thank you. Was there anything else with the Office of Human Rights?
Not
I
at this
believe
time.
so.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Mia.
All good. It's a partnership.
Should have turned over to you. Thank you, Mr. Mia. I appreciate your preparation of this packet. So that moves us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the Department of Health and Human Services. And Dr. Kroll is with us today to obviously represent the Department of Health and Human Services. We are also joined by Ms. Vivian Yao, because as we know, HHS's budget requires a lot of support. So thank you, Ms. Yao, for coming as well. Ms. McMillan, do you want to give us some highlights and headlines with regards to HHS's budget?
Yes, so as I previously mentioned, the executive has put forth about $2.6 million in proposed savings. That's a little over 1% of the budget, which again, as you've already mentioned, is less than what some other departments have been asked to do. Nonetheless, we've categorized the reductions really into three buckets. The first are ones that council staff recommends that you approve, and I can go through those quickly, but for right now, I'll just say they total about $1.289 million. Then there's a little bucket of proposed reductions, which the committee and council considered the similar items with some changes to specific dollar amounts, which you did not accept last time, and so which council staff has pulled together and said you should not accept this time, given that we know of no change in the council's thinking around this. And then a few items where council staff is recommending that you not take the reduction. And I know one of those items has already been discussed in the joint Health and Human Services and Education and Culture Committee when we get there as well. So if you if you'd like to have any opening comments, we can do that. And then when you're ready, I can go through the items.
Thank you. Dr. Kroll, would you like to say a few words up at the top?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody is staying safe and your families are all doing well, given the current situation we're living under. I think what you've got in front of you is the department's best effort to try to exercise some fiscal restraints in this time, in these uncertain economic times. COVID has changed a lot of how we do our normal work, and a lot of our partners and a lot of our processes have been changed and gone online and gone virtual. So it has created some opportunity to realize some savings in our ongoing operating budget across the department. We've tried to be judicious and not injuring programs and doing the least amount of harm where we could. But it is recognizing that we are doing budget savings plans in the middle of a pandemic where HHS is front and center on a lot of things. It's an odd kind of season. We're aided by the fact that a lot of the federal and state money that we've received has helped us to strengthen our responses that are directly related to pandemic. So we get a little bit of breathing room there and some capacity to do some things differently than we have. So it's been a challenge in going in both directions at the same time. But I think what we've got in front of you is our best effort at trying to balance between the ongoing pandemic and need for service and the need to save some money where we can.
Thank you, Dr. Kroll. I do have one general comment. Based on some of the good news that we've heard about federal stimulus that will be made available, I think HHS is well positioned to be able to draw down on some of those funds directly, and will likely be, as we were during CARES, the pass-through for various functions, whether it be rental assistance, whether it be the direct cash family assistance to families who may not have been eligible to receive the last round of individual checks issued by the federal government. And as we know, you are all stretched to the nines, administratively and internally. And so the good news is funds will be made available, but I continue to be concerned about the administrative infrastructure and the capacity of HHS to be able to turn around these resources as quickly as we all would like. And so I just ask that we look at the potential reductions, and I don't think what before us, represents cuts to that internal infrastructure. But as we look at FY22, I think we should also bear that in mind as well. I know it's not it doesn't get the same level of attention as the critical, important direct service programs, which we need. And my goodness, there's so many families in crisis, but we need that internal administrative capacity to be able to do all these other important things that we need to have done. So I will be looking at reductions through that lens, but also operational recommendations moving forward as well.
Okay, just want to say that we are looking forward to the next round of federal relief and support, and already thinking about how we position the department to take advantage of that and to put that into effect. We learned a lot and put a lot of things in place through this first round, through these first months of the pandemic and over the first year of this pandemic, that will serve us in terms of structures and processes that are already in place, so that we can adapt those to what the next next round of support is going to bring us, and hopefully get that out the door as quickly as possible. It is a challenge in terms of administrative structure and support, and we will continue to work our way through that as we go forward.
I appreciate that. And my last comment, and I know Councilmember Navarro has a comment she'd like to make as well as before we dive into the packet, is Councilmember Navarro and I did send a letter over almost 2 weeks ago asking for an update on the youth development programming initiative that we had appropriated before the summer recess. And so as we go through, and I know that item is not specifically noted within these reductions, but that program is still not yet off the ground. So Dr. Kroll, if you could incorporate the response to that into your comments as we go through, I would greatly appreciate it. As we all know, our youth have been, as so many other communities, severely impacted by everything that we are seeing before us. And so it remains a very high priority of this council, and I know your department as well, but it is something that is critical that we are able to move forward. Councilmember Navarro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for letting me join this session. And also thank you, Dr. Kroll, for everything that you continue to do within your department. You are in the forefront of this extraordinary crisis. And thank you to our staff as well and everyone involved. Generally speaking, just so that I understand, we did have, I think, last year when we were looking at some of these savings plans, et cetera, I think we made it clear that we felt the HHS was one of those departments where we really didn't think it would be appropriate to accept any kind of savings at all. And the reason why that is because every single item that you look, that I see in this packet, even the ones that are proposed to be accepted, every single one of them are areas that we have had other conversations, other discussions about how dire the need is and how many gaps we still have. And so I was wondering if we were to say no, are you able to work in order to redirect some of these funds to the areas that we have identified as gaps? I'll give you an example. ChildLink. So perhaps there isn't an opportunity because of the pandemic to do particular things the way they used to do it, but perhaps it could be redirected to provide supports because we know that this pandemic has created another big area of concern. Linkages to learning. We keep talking about all of those students who are disconnected right now, the problems the families are having at this moment in time, especially low-income families, Black and brown families. Can we now redirect that funding in order to somehow mitigate a little bit of that? Street Outreach Network. We know that right now there's so much conversation about reimagining public safety, about the SRO's programs, so many things. And Street Outreach Network is sort of that program that the school system relies on, that I know, a lot of youth rely on, et cetera. Could we now redirect that? So I'm just curious in terms of, what do you see as a director of HHS as opportunities to do this, especially in light of this emergency and this pandemic? We've had savings plans in the past that had to do with economic conditions, et cetera, and it was, and of course we're facing that as well. But at some point we have to, make some different decisions in terms of balancing the need with the resources. And there's, in my opinion, an incongruent approach, especially in HHS, to be almost nickel and diming these programs, given that at the same time we've had to do all these, adopt all these special appropriations to try and respond. So I was just curious about that. Like, what would be your philosophy or your approach, for example, if we were to say, we can't accept this? How would you go about redirecting those funds?
So one of the I can't say good things about the pandemic. There's nothing good about this pandemic. But one of the things that we have been able to do that really gives me some sense of pride in the department is that we have almost from the beginning of this process created a lot of flexibility in terms of how we repurpose and retask the providers and the work that they do under existing contracts. And we continue to do that all along. So when providers have told us that they can't get into schools or they can't be in person anymore, we've asked them to come back with a plan for how they can do it virtually and what they can do virtually, and to repurpose their time and energy to doing those things. So existing contracts, we've been flexible on. Our own provider service, the pieces we do in-house, we've been flexible on. And I don't see that changing. And so my message to the staff and to the department and the message from the county executive has been figure out ways to solve the problems and go forward on that. and we have done that. I think just a couple of the examples around that we have given linkages to learning and partners in their contracts a lot of flexibility to be able to respond to the needs of students and to reach out to them. We have, especially in high impact communities, our positive youth development program and our school-based services have been worked closely with Montgomery Public School Systems in their Office of Student and Family Support to provide students that they identify using their local wellness team. So we've stayed hand in glove with them and created flexible options to get connected to folks. It doesn't mean that we have hit all of the need by any stretch of the imagination. We know it is enormous. But we have continued to do things like having PYD and a Street Outreach Network retasked to do things that they can do in the midst of a pandemic when they can't be face to face with folks. I expect that my answer to you is that we will keep doing what we have been doing as we go forward in the pandemic, and that is to create opportunities and alternative ways for folks to provide service. At the same time, we were asked to do a savings plan and have to comply with that. And what we've done where we could is identify funding where our provider community is not using the funding, is not making use of funding, and is able to meet to continue to do some service with folks and have not made use of that funding. So it gives us a chance to realize to meet the requirements of submitting the savings plan, and at the same time to keep going forward.
I appreciate that response. And I think the key phrase that you just shared was that you needed to comply with the request for a savings plan. I think it is, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's not that these providers, if given the opportunity to redirect, don't have plenty of need to respond to. And again, I also base that on the fact that the conversations that we have had about the growing needs and the scope of the need is one that we are keenly aware that we can't fulfill 100%. We know that. We know that the need is extraordinary. And, given that sort of contrast, it's just bizarre. It feels a little strange for me to sit here and look at these recommended cuts and be able to support it while at the same time we're turning around and trying to, approve all these special appropriations, et cetera, hoping, of course, that some of them we would be able to recover, but not knowing. Meanwhile, the need continues. And so, so just a thought to my colleagues on the committee that I think that we were clear that we did not feel that HHS should be that department where we try to find, little things here and there because then we turn around and appropriate more money to fill the need. So I really feel like we should just not accept these and continue to work to restrict our spending in other areas and wait for that federal money to come. But it's tough. And I think speaking also from like the morale standpoint, I know how difficult it is right now for our nonprofit organizations and also for the staff, the frontline staff that is out there doing amazing things in HHS specifically. I know how hard this situation has been because nobody thought it was going to be sustained for such a long period of time. So anyway, I think, just an observation for the committee. And thank you, Dr. Kroll, for that answer.
So I appreciate those comments, Councilmember. I'm going to go to you next. But before I turn over to you, I just want to highlight a couple things. That was extraordinarily well said by Councilmember Navarro. It does feel incongruent when we know that the need is overwhelming and growing, and we're seeing it just in our own constituent offices, let alone the agencies who are tasked with, who we refer all these constituents that are calling us because they're desperate, we're referring them to you. And then you guys are picking up those cases from there. And we know just from the conversations we're having how difficult and challenging those cases are. And that doesn't include the cases that are coming directly to you and the cases of, large numbers of families who have entered into the system, whether it be through our contractors and community-based organizations or directly through HHS and our clinics and their services. And so I do agree that it feels incongruent, perfect word, to be discussing 2.8 million in reductions when we know we have much more need. But I also know how challenging it can be from an operational standpoint and from a budgeting standpoint to adjust, those. It's not even just the contracts within the nonprofit organizations, and I do commend HHS's flexibility, but those line items within county agencies and funding, because on the surface, most of these reductions make sense, that you can explain. But to Councilmember Navarro's point, gosh, that money could be directed someplace else where we know there is need. If there is a technical or administrative issue that has not allowed us to be able to move something forward, then maybe we should shift those funds where they're the most needed. So it's an important point. Councilmember Rice.
So thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And so, as you heard from Councilmember Navarro, I mean, we've had this conversation before. Dr. Kroll, you've seen it with when Director Alawali was there, and we had our savings plans back then. And it's much of the same. Look, the reality is this, is that when we look at, and I'll give you a prime example, what happened with Food Council and what we look to do there and standing up the operation and migrating a lot of their focus to a different effort in terms of making sure that we're shoring up, whether it's our farmers and making sure that that food production is ramped up to help support our food banks, working with those entities themselves. And we put more money in and just redirected it because we knew it wasn't going to be used for the standard process. It was going to be redirected to something else. And we gave them additional money on top of that, right? So in this instance, I don't see why we wouldn't do the same. It certainly is one where it makes sense for us to continue to foster a migration of some of the things that we may not be doing and put it into others. There is no question that across the board, your employees, your individual sub-departments are doing way more than they've ever been doing before. You've tasked them with tremendous challenges. As I look out, I'm over here in the office today, and I look out and see the line stretched all the way to right in front of the County Council office building for Richard Montgomery, one of our testing sites. Those are your employees that are there that are being exhausted by folks who are in fear right now of not getting vaccinated. And your employees are on the front lines of that, handling and dealing with these types of situations. There is no way conscionably that I can say that I can reduce Health and Human Services budget at a time when I see something like this happening right outside the window of the seat of the county, of county government. And so from that perspective, Dr. Kroll, look, I respect you tremendously, and you know that. And you are being a team player in trying to adhere to some of the requests that the county executive has made. But at the same time, I know, because I've had conversations with you, that there are other things that you could do with this money. Not that you've requested it, but I know that there are other things that you could do. And so from that perspective, I'm going to support you and the great people who work for HHS in being innovative in terms of ways in which we can continue to address the challenges that we find in our community. I have faith in you. I have faith in our employees, and know that that money, although could be, garnered to help out with the county budget, will go to good use in helping out our constituency instead. So that's where I stand.
So I just need to respond to this just a little bit, if you don't mind, Council Chair Albornoz, or Committee Chair Albornoz. I think thank you, Councilmember Rice. And let me just say that first off, that those folks that are doing that vaccination today are HHS staff, but they are also library and rec staff and other staff that are making it possible to get folks vaccinated. So a special note of appreciation to all of them as well. And I will pass that on to them if they didn't hear it. I'm a team player. I mean, I certainly try to work within teams and across systems every place and every opportunity I can, and have done so the entire time I've been here. But I will say that we are looking at two things. This is not going to just be about the pandemic. in the state we're in right now, long term, we're going to be dealing with the aftermath of this, and there is going to be ongoing long-term need for the county to have resources available to support folks. And I have no idea, none of us have any idea what the federal support is going to look like or how long it's going to last past the moment when a state of emergency is declared over because people have been vaccinated. But the economic fallout and the psychological and emotional fallout is going to be with us for a while, and the need to do different kinds of support for folks is going to be with us. So I think there's a longer view in this that I'm taking in this. When I think about these savings plans that are put forward, it is funding that is not actively being used in the moment by the providers and by us, that represents a margin of the work we do in the face of enormous amounts of resources and funding and programs that you all have helped us stand up, that we have stood up to provide support to folks. And in the face of, in the next several months, more of that coming. Because I have no doubt that that the minds that are in this room are cooking up some new ideas. I'm cooking up some new ideas, and we just need to put our heads together to figure out what those new ideas are going to be. And the very providers that we're talking about today have been and will be part of that support effort. So I will say that to say that where there is need, we're going to have to continue to meet the need, and we have federal and state resources to use to meet that need, so that providers stay afloat and stay in operation, and that our residents who are most dire need get that support they need.
So, a couple thoughts, and like, I'm really excited. So I've, it's just sitting on this side of the aisle. So just to summarize really quickly, what Council members Navarro and Rice have talked about is sort of a paradigm shift in how we're thinking about reductions to HHS. To the nickel and diming point, Councilmember Navarro, who is our honorary member of the HHS committee, and we love her for a lot of reasons. And I agree. I just don't think it makes a whole lot of walking around sense for us to make reductions individually that you can justify and make sense and not look at the broader picture. And so, this is a paradigm shift in how we look at reductions within specific departments. But my summation, based on Councilmember Rice and what Councilmember Navarro, our honorary member of the HHS committee, and Councilmember Glass, I'd love to hear your input in this as well. But that we give HHS an opportunity to come back to us and let us know where these funds should be redirected. Not that they be taken, but that where they should be redirected to meet the immediate need that everyone agrees is there, that we are working on identifying supplemental appropriations for in other areas. We know we have a fiscal challenge before us, no question, but the county executive has noted that HHS remains a priority, as evidenced by trying to hold the line on making the reductions to HHS as a department or agency. So it's a paradigm shift, Ms. McMillan and Ms. Yao, in terms of how we look at reductions, but I think it's an important one given the context of in the environment that we're in now. Councilmember Glass, can I give you an opportunity to weigh in and get your thoughts?
I'd be delighted. Thank you very much. And I really do appreciate the thoughtful comments by my colleagues. I agree with the sentiments that everybody has shared. And Dr. Kroll, I appreciate, I'll phrase it this way from my vantage point, your slight pushback, right, in your role in county government and as a department head. And I will say that we're all team players and we all play for Team Montgomery. And so that is part of this conversation, and we all have different roles to play. And so we're just coming together in this huddle of sort, to continue my bad metaphor for a little bit more. The work that you and your entire team are doing right now is the most important work that county government can be doing at this moment in time. Keeping people safe and saving people's lives. At this point in time, everything else pales in comparison. And that situation, combined with the economic realities that are out of our control, I think, while not fully in a crisis yet, situations like this are opportunities to spur innovation and creativity, as you're hearing and as we know. And I want to continue that push to rethink our operations and to be mindful of the technology and the needs that are coming and prepare for that in whatever organizational changes need to be made right now. And I think in some regard, the conversation we're having and the sentiments that are being shared, these cuts, I think, are penny wise and pound foolish, because we know the needs are not going away. And so they're very short-term fixes, and the mere fact that we're already talking about special appropriation to accommodate for whatever cuts we might have to make during this budget or next budget signifies the catch-22 that we're in. But I also really like the path that my colleagues are going down and agree with it about redirecting some of these cuts and continuing that train of thought. You know, whether we redirect some of our personnel and some of our resources towards supporting the cultural competency gap that we know exists, that continues to be highlighted with our websites and our outreach. So whether we put staff, front-facing staff, IT staff into language translation services, web development, whether we can help a buffer and create a more robust clearinghouse, not necessarily taking over the functions of state government when it comes to a one-stop online shop, but trying to coordinate all the different websites that our residents are scouring over every single day and hitting refresh nearly every hour to try and find vaccines. So I think redirecting resources in some of these ways, and then clearly the issues within our schools with mental health and other challenges that we are addressing in real time as well as a council and trying to figure out a path forward. So I agree with where my colleagues are, and those are my thoughts. I don't know if you have anything more to say, or I'll turn back to the chair for continued line item conversation.
No, I'm fine. Let's go forward.
Okay, Councilmember Rice, you had another comment.
Just very quickly, it would be very different if we were looking at increasing our budget. And Director Kroll, I certainly understand and appreciate that right now it's difficult to think about what something like that would be and how that money would be directed, because there's so many different things that are going on and you're trying to move people around. So I get that. All we're saying is we just want to keep you whole and allow you within that wholeness to do some of that redirecting. We understand not all of it may happen right away, that it's going to require some work and thought about how it is that we need to get this done to make those things happen. And so we understand, and I understand that there may be pressure associated with that. So I just want to speak for myself. I'm not going to speak for my colleagues, and just saying to you, I understand that's not going to happen tomorrow in terms of you directing your entire department to do everything that it that will encompass this money. I get that. There are some things that I know that you and I have spoken about, that I'm sure you have spoken to other council members about, your own ideas about things that you can do that may happen more immediate than in the future. But either way, just as you said, and I completely agree with you, this is for the long haul. And so this gives you some stability. This actually gives you a way to project and say that even independent of what the federal government may do, now you have the ability to start utilizing some of this money to create at least that short-term, if not medium-term, strategic plan for what it is that you'd like to see. That's what I think this affords you. And so from that perspective, I think we find ourselves in a really good place because of that. And so I just wanted to put that out there, because I also want to acknowledge and make sure that we're not putting undue pressure on you that is going to be difficult for you to meet. So I want to just state that publicly and make sure, because I know that that could be a concern as well. You have done a great job of really being able to stand up a lot of things that we have seen working with our nonprofit community and others to really answer the call for our community. And I know that can continue. right? And I know that at the proper pace, working with you and leadership in your department, you will make that happen and continue to do that. I have faith. So I just wanted to let you know that and make sure that you understand and make sure that I stated for the record that piece of it as well, that I know may also be a part of consternation on your part that I wanted to address.
Thank you, Councilmember Rice. We're going to have to redefine what the word pressure means. This has been an enormously pressure-filled system, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So we will do what we need to do to keep folks safe and keep moving forward.
Councilmember Navarro would like to speak again.
Thank you. I really appreciate this conversation. I think a lot of times, we're very focused on what's in front of us and we address all of those issues, but this shift in how we deliberate on particular items and make sure that it's comprehensive, it's very important to the full picture. And Dr. Cole, you mentioned the issue of sustainability in the long term, and you're absolutely right. We're right now engaged in a process to evaluate our fiscal policies. The committee that I chair, to look at our fiscal sustainability and to look at how we continue to keep Montgomery County strong in that area. And so I appreciate this because a lot of times these things seem disconnected, but they're not. And so we are looking at not just what we're facing right now, but what we are going to face post-COVID-19. The region is having this conversation. Yesterday at the Council of Governments meeting, it was clear that the region is having a conversation about economic development. How can we position ourselves? Because we need to strengthen our tax base as well. This situation that we're facing right now is going to have really, really long-term impacts. And so I think it is important to have the conversations under the entire, context. The one other thing I will add is that I know that with our racial equity and social justice law, we did require the executive to also include some kind of note regarding how budgetary decisions impact, racial equity and social justice. And so I hope, and hope we can clarify that through our staff, but that this is also very important. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that each and every one of the items that we are facing through HHS have a major impact on our racial equity and social justice goals, because we know that the disproportionality has only been exacerbated with this pandemic. And that is why, in my opinion, every single dollar that we have, if we can redirect that to shore up some of those services that we know are in dire need right now, then we should do that. And we no doubt are going to have to make some broader, more difficult decisions about our fiscal sustainability, and we will do that, just like we did in the last recession. But I think generally speaking, it is important for the body to have a clear, hopefully, understanding and a complete philosophy, if you will, in terms of what are those areas that we will continue to protect, because we know, again, that it's going to be very hard. In closing, I will only say this as well. When we think about racial equity and social justice and we think about the disproportionality in our communities, I'm always struck by how I think before the pandemic, even though those inequities existed, folks, were working, people were taking advantage of opportunities. There was a sense of, I'm working hard, I'm doing what I need to do. I'm trying, I'm doing whatever I can to be stable and provide for my family. We know that this pandemic has come to disrupt that for many, 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 many people in our county. And like I said before, because at first we thought it was just going to be maybe 2 months, 3 months, and now here we are, almost a year. That to me is just really concerning, because we know that so many people who before had a pretty solid safety net, they don't anymore. So anyway, thank you for indulging me in all of this, but I do think these are important conversations, because we've just been going, trying to, mitigate this impact. And I feel like as a body, we don't have a lot of time,
Right.
to really go deep and connect all these dots and then be able to make the decisions with that kind of context. So thank you so much. It's an awesome committee.
Yeah, I appreciate you, Councilmember Navarro. So I'm going to make two more comments and then recommend the next step to council staff. So we did, as a body, ask for the county executive to put forward a savings plan, and he did. And we all underscore that, as Councilmember Navarro mentioned, and the chair of our GO committee, she knows this better than anybody, we have a fiscal challenge before us. And it's undeniably difficult, with HHS being the largest executive branch agency, to not have some kind of a savings plan that doesn't include HHS. We all get that. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. But I think that what the committee is saying, and I know that my colleagues have shared in different settings, is the timing of this is also really important because we are, as we all say, still in the middle of this crisis before us. Families are being tested through our social safety net in ways that I haven't seen in 14 years of being in county government. And if we do anything that in any way even slightly loosens that safety net, then it makes it more likely that more people will fall through. And then once they are completely in crisis, it's going to cost even more to address their complex needs. And so for me, this is an important preventative step, especially with where we are right now, because we've got so many families that are right on the line and heading over a cliff, and very soon. And we know federal funds are on the way, which will help in the short term shore up some of these programs and services. So because of all of that and the comments of all of my colleagues, which I completely agree with, and I also understand, OMB is with us as well, and has the arduous task of trying to make all of these numbers work, which I know is very difficult. But it certainly seems clear to me that I'd like to recommend to council staff that we have a second session, but that it be focused not on the line item reductions, but recommendations on where we might be able to shift. And many of them we wouldn't accept outright, but some, make sense administratively. But what are those that could be shifted to another clear and undeniable area of need? And I also know it's not as simple as just moving one line item over to the next. There's some accounting that needs to take place and some procedures that need to take place as well. But I'm confident we can work through that because we are obviously in a state of emergency right now. So Ms. McMillan and Ms. Yao, if you could help us, what did you hear just now, and what would you recommend given comments of colleagues in how to process this and funnel it into a next step?
Well, I think we would report back at this time that in terms of the council actions on the savings plan, which don't necessarily all have to be taken in one step, that you're not agreeing to any of the identified reductions in the savings plan for HHS at this time.
Correct.
So that if it's the will of the body to want to take your actions on the remainder of the savings plan, you could do that with the HHS piece set aside for further work. And that staff would work with council member staff and the department to talk about those areas where we believe there's identified need, or where the department knows that they have some strategies that they would like to implement in the long term, and to see how that matches up with the funding that you sort of have, identified in the savings plan. We know we have about that much funding in the savings plan that potentially could be readjusted. And we would come back to the committee with those recommendations to see how that would move forward. And I did just want to say, Councilmember Navarro did raise the issue of the racial equity and social justice law, which I have glanced at, and I'm not your attorney. But there is some language specifically around special appropriations, but there's also language around the whole plan where the executive is supposed to discuss how the capital and operating budget programs and actions forward the cause of social justice and racial equity. And there are also, in the reporting requirements, there are also reporting requirements about departments moving racial equity and social justice forward. So I think within that framework, even if it doesn't specifically, identify a savings plan action, certainly Councilmember Navarro is correct in saying that the framework of the law would include these kinds of budget decisions, I think, even if it doesn't require like a specific statement to be drawn up. It certainly is within the metrics of the plan and of the reports that are envisioned in the law. So
perfect. That's a great summary. And obviously a lot of time and energy went into proposing these reductions, and now we're asking that time and energy be put into seeing where they might be redirected. But I think it's a worthy exercise. And so if somebody could please make a motion that we reject the reductions as presented, and that we ask central staff to work with OMB and HHS staff on a second round on where these funds, whether they stay or might be redirected, and we review that one more time. And we had a motion to move.
And I'll second.
Second. All right. All those in favor? Oh, Ms. McMillan, go ahead.
No, go ahead and vote. I just have another.
All those in favor say, raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Ms. McMillan.
I did just want to mention that many of the savings that are identified are things that are happening this year because of the pandemic. So when we talk about how we might redirect the funds in this current framework, we also need to think about whether the items in the savings plans need to be restored in the coming year once the pandemic eases. So for example, there are savings that are accruing in home care, in assisted living care, in some of these areas where people right now are fearful to have people come in their homes. And so the department cannot actually do those programs, but we don't want to push those programs aside in the long term. When people come out of the pandemic, we know that we're going to have to go back in and reinstate some of these programs. This may also be true in some of the childcare settings as well. So I just would say, as we think about how to redirect the money identified in the savings plan for FY21, then we should also have a discussion about what the expectation would be for anything established through the redirection of these monies to continue in the next fiscal year without necessarily to the detriment of things that frankly we hope we will have reactivated, in FY22.
So a couple of comments around that. One is just that a number of these proposed reductions represent savings plans because of cost savings in this fiscal year, and there is no thinking that they carry over into FY22 as cuts or reductions. They are simply savings plans, money that we realize we're not going to have to spend as the budget is currently structured. So that to your first point, and if there's anything in this that changes, then we would have to talk about that a little differently. But to your point, our thinking is that these are not reductions that are cuts to the budget on an ongoing basis. These are simply savings that we were growing. The other request that, well, to your point, that just means that anything that we're talking about as an alternative is a short-term alternative at this point. And then the last one is just a humble request on behalf of the team that if you're going to ask us to come back with some alternatives, that we'd be able to do that in writing, so that we can use some other time to try to do some of the other work, the other 10,000 things we've got to get done. We will come back if you need us back in front of you, obviously.
Of course.
If we can do it in writing first, that would be, and satisfy it that way, that would be helpful.
I appreciate that, Dr. Kroll. Totally agree. Want to make sure you're focused on where your attention needs to be focused. And so we'll work with our central staff. And I just want to let you know that we're doing this because we believe in you guys. We're doing this because we know that this is a worthy investment, and we got to do our best to hold the line. And we so appreciate the leadership and dedication of you and your team. And challenges lie ahead, but I think we're in pretty good shape right now. And so, Ms. McMillan, was there anything else that we needed to cover today?
Don't believe so. Ms. Yao, is there anything else? No, I don't think so.
I didn't know if the discussion around the family strengthening funds met your satisfaction, Councilmember Albornoz. You had mentioned it at the beginning of your remarks.
Thank you. I think we had, Councilmember Navarro and I had sent a letter which we're still waiting for a response from, and I know that one is being worked on. We'd like to get that as soon as possible, Dr. Kroll, and just once again reiterate here publicly that our expectation is that that program be implemented and carried over into the next fiscal year. We know there are challenges, with securing a vendor who doesn't have an assertion that the program would be extended into FY22, but the expectation was always that it would be. And so it's really important that we stand up that initiative as quickly as possible, and if it's possible to redirect some of these funds to that, to address some of the potential budget challenges, that would be okay. But as we all acknowledge, and you know better than anyone from a behavioral health standpoint, the mental health and social and emotional well-being of our youth right now is tenuous, particularly for our older youth who are have in our communities of color that have been disproportionately impacted by the pandemic, many of which have had real challenges with the academic component and the disconnection that they have faced by not being able to go to school. And so the work of our youth providers and Street Outreach Network has never been more important, and something we really got to stand up and move forward as quickly as possible.
So I know that I certainly know that parts of the appropriation have gone forward, and it's the piece around the family strengthening piece that has been where we've had the bottleneck. There is, and I will take full responsibility for this, there is a draft response that I have not had a chance to tunnel into sitting in my inbox. And I know there's some, I glanced at it and I thought there were some questions that I had about it, so didn't deem it ready to finalize and send forward to you, but we will get that to you as soon as we can.
Thank you. And Councilmember Navarro has a follow-up point.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to continue this notion of connecting dots. We were briefed and there was a release of the Reimagining Public Safety Report. I, for example, did not see this component included, but I think it is very much part of this, if you want to call it, paradigm shift that we're all engaged in right now and discussing how do we best direct our resources to get the most optimal outcomes for our youth and families. I don't think I have to share with any of you that obviously as we work in our Education and Culture Committee to look at the impact for our students, there have been numbers cited of the number of students that have not even logged on, period. And all of the particular challenges that many families face and many young people face that has to do, of course, with, issues of poverty and issues of instability in the home and things of that nature. And we've discussed this ad nauseum in the former, past HHS sessions about how programs like the Street Outreach Network are interesting because we don't necessarily talk a lot about the things that program, how it interjects to actually prevent certain things from happening. And sometimes it is much more difficult, I think, to quantify prevention from that perspective. But, if we didn't have that kind of program working with the other parts of our network, which I'm very proud of what Montgomery County has been able to stood up in terms of collaboration, things would be a lot more difficult right now and a lot more dire. And so this, this particular proposal was just an opportunity to provide a little bit more capacity. I mean, it's not the end all be all, but I'm really concerned that we haven't been able to stand that up. Again, these are families that are not going to show up to participate in a reimagining public safety task force, or they don't necessarily come to testify. I mean, this is who they are, but they are in need. So I would really, truly, again, reiterate my concern and hope that we could expedite this and find a common ground to make it happen. Dr. Kroll, thank you.
Councilmember Rice.
So I want to piggyback off of something that Councilmember Navarro said and make sure that we're paying very close attention to this and the trends. And it's something that ties into the OLO report that I requested in dealing with teen youth employment and what's going on with the COVID crisis affecting our young people. many people have seen in the media carjackings on the rise all across the nation, not just here, in our area. And so it says something, because not only are the numbers skewing higher, but the age is actually skewing younger. And so what that says is that we have a greater role to play. So organizations like Street Outreach Network that do that need to be able to then go in and do things a little bit differently in addressing some of those issues, right? Working together to figure out new ways of outreach. And so while I certainly understand from an administrative standpoint and others that there may be cost savings, those are the kinds of things that I see going directly to a new sort of way and reaching out to some of these kids that are at promise and making sure that they understand. But also, in addition, not just with Street Outreach Network, but also with Worksource Montgomery and other kinds of things, to getting them back to connected to employment. Because anyone will tell you, including Luis Cardona, that when it comes to having folks and making sure that they have other options, that's one of the biggest deterrents to them going towards a criminal element. If folks feel as though they don't have options, that direct funnel opens wide. That channel is right there and goes right in. So, when some of these programs that were joint, whether it's Lead for Life and others, I know through Conservation Corps, all these great organizations, that funding kind of dried up. That's where we can redirect some of this money to do these kinds of things, understanding and reacting to what it is that we're seeing that's happening in our community. And so, like Linda said, like everybody said, I know that it's going to be some work that's involved in terms of identifying, but I know that they're out there. I know there are places where we can spend this money and reap great results in terms of really when it comes to our at-promise youth and getting them connected. Whether it's doing COVID testing or all kinds of other things, or being assistants out here at Richard Montgomery, right? Kids would love to be able to have something to do and be employed and be able to do those kinds of things. Well, we can do that, right? And serve two purposes. As folks are directing traffic, and it's now Rockville City Police that are out there, we could have folks invest and have them doing that. And the person could actually be earning something instead of thinking that they've got to carjack somebody at the local Exxon here. That's the difference. And so that's the thinking that I think we're going to get to in terms of how we can really move this forward. So anyway, just food for thought.
So the carjacking that recently occurred not far from my neighborhood on Connecticut Avenue was the perpetrators were a 15-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. It is, and we were on the Public Safety Committee. We got a briefing on this briefly yesterday on carjackings, and you are absolutely right, Councilmember Rice. It's younger and younger kids. It's alarming to say the least. Councilmember Glass.
Yeah, just real briefly, it sounds like we're all on the same page here with the need to think through this holistically and be forward thinking in how we save and redirect taxpayer dollars, and appreciate the proposal that the chair has put forward, and fully recognize the workload that this is adding to the department, as has been noted. But I think in the long run, we will all be better off, especially the department, if we take a little more time to think through the future steps and how to keep all of our residents healthy and safe across the board.
Thank you. So just to confirm then, Ms. McMillan, and based on Dr. Kroll's point, then I think we can take these recommendations to full council. We don't necessarily have to have another HHS committee session, and we can review them then. And I'm confident my colleagues are going to be supportive of the approach we've taken, because they're all on record saying something similar. So let's move this forward to full council as the next session, and we'll review, and I will provide the context when we discuss this with the other members of the council. All right, with that, I believe we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Appreciate all of you.